Hi guys, in this video I'm going to be doing a flip through and just my initial impression of this refutation and confirmation book 5, Writing Rhetoric. We have used book 1 through 4 so far, and this book is a little bit below grade level for her. I'm using this with my 8th grader, but this is a book that we found a little bit later on in her homeschool journey. I wish that we found it earlier on because she really does well with this curriculum. However, because high school and college and all of that is something that we are looking towards, I am deciding that this book is going to be the last book that we're going to be using in this series. Wish that we found it earlier or it was graded differently, because she does really well with this. Alright, so when I am finished with books 1, well, this one would complete our journey through books 1 through 5, and either at the end of the semester or the school year, I'll come back and do a review of the first 5 books. First 5 books. Alright, so anyway, so it's just going to be my initial impressions. I do want to say that, in my opinion, I think this is the book where they actually really start to do a lot of their own writing. The first 3 books, they worked a lot on working on building good paragraphs and sentences and paragraphs, a little bit of dictation, a lot of grammar built in between, as they were learning the first few exercises within progymnasmata or the progym writing style. In book 4, when they were working on Kreia, at least following the writing rhetoric flow, they did a little bit more writing because they were following like that 6 paragraph step of working through the Kreia. So they did a little bit more writing in book 4. But in this book, first they start by looking at the works of someone else, and then they work their way up so they start by rewriting someone else's work, baby steps, by first rearranging paragraphs and then working their way all the way up to doing their own writing as they get towards the end of the book. And that's my understanding of this book so far. Alright, so you have your table of contents, and first they're going to start going over a couple of the things that was done in prior books. And that's another thing that I'm starting to notice in this series, is that as you are learning a new exercise within ProGym, it doesn't totally leave behind the other exercises that was completed before, at least within the writing rhetoric. So in this book, the focus is refutation and confirmation, but they're going to be going over or touching on some of the exercises that was done in prior books. Alright, so you're going to be going over narratives, making a legend, let's have an argument. So, of course, to refute or to confirm or to argue for or against something, they would have to understand the difference between an argument and a quarrel. So even though this is, she's technically behind, it would be useful to know just a little bit of logic, I realize, because that's what logic is, like, learning how to, make a good argument. So technically she is behind, but it really goes well together because she is doing logic, something that she's actually really enjoying as well, and she's going to be arguing for or against later on in this book, so it's going to really tie in nicely. Anyway, so just to make sure you get that's your table of contents. And you have they're going to go through different confirmation and refutation at the end, so 3 times. Then you have some other useful information at the back. This is an outline of, I believe, Cinderella, so they can use that as a map for outlining. I really do find, though, that the outlining books that I was able to pick up at the end of while I was doing the 3rd book to be really useful, because it takes you from not knowing how to outline all the way to outlining. But something I noticed with classical writing is that they like to take actual works that was done before and use those as guidelines. So that's the same thing that is going to be done here with outlining. They're going to use the child can look at an entire story outline and use that as a map to help them. Anyway, then you have glossary, the rubrics, another information in the back there. And this is a suggested typical week. This flow has never really worked for us. I guess it depends on your teaching style and the child that you're using it with. For us, because she really enjoys writing, getting into the story, discussing it, and even if it's just asking for a few lines for the response, she takes time with her vocabulary and dressing it up with synonyms and antonyms, like really enjoys writing. So for us, it takes quite a while getting through one lesson, and I allow her to do it because even though it takes longer, she gets a lot out of it. But if it is the goal is just to understand the concept being taught and just to get through the lesson, maybe it is something that, maybe this is a typical week that you can follow. So it's a 5-week setup, or 5-day, setup. And then this is the flow of the different books. This is also on the back cover. You have introduction to students, a note there, followed on this page. And then there is a note on modern composition, and I'm guessing that compares it to classical writing. Authentic classical writing, the vitality of rhetoric. And then questions about apparent omissions in this writing rhetoric series, and I guess why those omissions were made. And onward, where he is hoping that this book would help you in getting over some of the hurdles in teaching writing. Then here he discusses the projem and the practice of modern writing. Continued on this page. Followed by here where it's outlining all of the different exercises within the projem writing style or progymnasmata, starting from fable all the way through declamation. And depending on the curriculum that you use, it may have the stages a little bit laid out a little bit differently, but it is 14 exercises, I believe, within projem. All right. Then you have objectives of refutation and confirmation, this book. All right, so before we get to this section, teaching, refutation, and confirmation, that is in the teacher's edition, that's where we start to see some of the differences between the teacher's edition and the student's edition, because after objectives for refutation and confirmation, it just goes right into the lesson. All right, so you have some notes on teaching, refutation, and confirmation for you to read through. And then you have the flow that the different lessons they follow, all right? So up until book 4, all of the lessons followed this same pattern. But in this book 5, there's an additional section called Revise It, because they are going to learn how to basically rewrite the works of prior that was done before. And that's going to lead to them being able to write their own. That seems to be something that's done a lot in classical writing. But anyway, so then you have a historical note, and it's basically letting you know that even though writing rhetoric is not like a history curriculum, it does touch or borrows from different era in history. So if you so wish, you can see what like stories may touch on a particular era. Like in this book, refutation and confirmation, it is going to touch a little bit about colonial America. Yeah, so if it is you wanted to, you can incorporate that into your history, like by doing a unit study or focusing on that era of history, or not. But it is something that you can do, and it also you also know what the next book is going to touch on. So if you wanted to, even if not do it in this, school year, touch on it in the next school year if you so wish to. But it is pointed out there. Then you have some additional notes. And it has this recording section, and we've done this about 3 or 4 times because it can take a little long. However, for the times that she did do it, she really enjoyed, being able to kind of, speak into the recorder and hearing herself, basically tell back the story to herself. It was actually really enjoyable for her. So that's something that might be worth trying, even if just a couple of times. And then you get into the lesson, and this is something that's also going to be different in the teacher's book compared to the student's book, and that's those additional like gray boxes, and those are going to have like sample answers, little notes on like the objectives of each lesson, teacher notes, indication of where there are teacher notes to the back of the lesson, and each lesson is going to have a teacher notes section that also is going to be omitted from the student book. And this is at the end of each lesson is going to have a page like this that says teacher pages, right, with a page with notes that's also for the teacher, and that's going to be omitted from the student edition as well. All right, so for lesson 1, to get started, important terms are going to be in bold, whether they're vocabulary or terms that are going to be explained. And then he explains what refutation and confirmation is. So refutation is a short essay that attacks certain part of a narrative, whereas confirmation is a short essay that defends certain parts of a narrative. So they're going to do some refutation and confirmation specific, like closer towards the back of the book, but at first they're going to start with reviewing some of the exercises within ProGym that was done in prior books, and slowly working their way up to refutation and confirmation. Right, so you have the story, The Legend of John Henry, an adapted version with some important terms highlighted. Then they're going to get into the tell it back section, which is, that flow is common. Well, not common, sorry. That's the flow that all the other books take as well. So they're going to tell back the story in their own words, and then you talk about it. Now here you see it says TE. So if you turn to the teacher pages section, wherever that first TE is, it usually corresponds with the first note on the teacher pages. So you can just follow. So you know that this is the first TE that was mentioned in this lesson. It says number 1, what parts of the story could you attack or refute? That's what that says. So if you go here, it says talk about it. So John Henry's superhuman strength is an unbelievable aspect of the story, but I enjoy legends in which the hero is super strong. What troubles me more is John Henry's pride. I find it unbelievable that he would ruin his health and destroy his life just to defeat a machine in a race. So you see, it guides you through step by step. So you can either let them respond first, or if it is, depending on the child that you're working with, you can give them a sample response, and it's right there, so you don't even have to try to come up with it if it's, a little bit challenging. So it can guide, depending on the student, give them a guide on how it is to work through it, and then hopefully they will work their way up to being able to do it themselves first, if that makes sense. Like with my daughter, she prefers to do the one that I use this, where she prefers to write her responses first and not be influenced by what is written, and then hear what it is was suggested as a sample answer. So it really depends on the child that you're using it with, before or after. So using the sample responses before or after would differ. That is how I have found it to be. So anyway, so then it has more teacher notes, of course, corresponding teacher response on the teacher pages. Then it goes into deeper section, and there's a bit of grammar and vocabulary incorporated. Then you have your writing time. And within writing time, the flow of writing time is like first sentence play, then copiousness, then amplification. But later on, it's going to add some additional steps. It's going to take out amplification and add two new steps. But anyway, so writing time, they work on sentence play. Of course, there's sample answers sprinkled throughout the teacher's edition to help you out. Then they work on copiousness. So it would be, good for them to be familiar with those terms since they are going to be working on that quite a bit. You have grammar sprinkled throughout. Not necessarily enough to be a full grammar curriculum, but definitely reinforcement. And then they're going to work on amplification. And the term is defined, so they're doing a little bit of vocabulary in there, just a little bit. And as you can see, the amplification section is quite detailed. And then they're going to speak it, right? And this is the portion where, they can, if it is you so wish or they wish to, dive in and, kind of enjoy it a little bit by speaking into a recorder. If it's a child with a decent enough or good comprehension, a lot of this, they are able to read and understand on their own, and you kind of come in here or there. But I found that at least for us, because some of the sections, now this one says alone or in a group, but sometimes, it may suggest that with someone, and I have found that, at least myself and my daughter have found that it's a little bit more fun for her to have someone to do it. If I had another daughter that was using this, then they could have do it together, but since that's not the case, I do this curriculum with her. So after your speak it section, this revised section is new to the level 5, right? And basically they're going to start working on, so to speak, rewriting works that was done before, starting as simple as noticing the order that a story is supposed to flow and rewrite it. So just by visually doing it, and then slowly work their way up to being able to follow the pattern or the sequence that of a written piece, and then write their own. So you have the sequence. They explain what following the sequence would be, and then they introduce them to proofreading, and a little note here to you, the teacher. And if it is you used something like, say, Evermore paragraph editing, which we've used before, or grammar curriculum that does a lot of proofreading in it, then this is something that they will be familiar with. So they are going to be working with that in this book as well. And then, of course, you have your teacher note section. And then we get into lesson 2. Now, I'm not going to flip through lesson 2, but as you can see, it starts with reviewing narratives, which was book 2 and book 3. So at the beginning, they're really going to be, reviewing a lot of the pro-gym exercises that was done prior. All right, so I'm going to go to lesson 5. And lesson 5, it looks at let's have an argument. All right, so this, as I said, this curriculum, she is technically behind, but an argument is basically like a logic, right? Knowing how to have a good argument. So even though it's not necessary for them to dive deep into logic, because in this book it's going to discuss the difference between quarrels and arguments, which is what's done in logic, it might be a good idea for them to at least have a basic idea of what logic is. So in chapter 5, it does start off by telling you the purpose of the chapter. It discusses arguments and quarrels, because that is going to be a new section introduced in the writing portion. So you talk about a quarrel, an argument. And if you notice at the bottom here, you have a teacher note. So if you were to turn to your teacher pages, so here it says, what are some of the main points in his argument against slavery? And here it will go into some of the arguments. All right? So we continue through. Let us not deceive ourselves. And there is a teacher note. All right? I think I missed one. Before, let's not deceive ourselves. Oh, okay, so under arguments, there's a teacher notes there. So that would be this. And then under the land is polluted. The land is polluted with blood. There's a teacher notes here. The land is polluted with blood. And it has the notes or suggested response here. So the teacher notes are really helpful. So everywhere you see TE, you just look for the corresponding teacher notes and the teacher pages. All right, so then you have your tell it back section. Talk about it. Here you have teacher notes, and in the back it actually gives you a sample of a sample story that looks at the conversation and a sample story that actually looks at the brawl. You're going to go deeper, and the deeper section gets a little bit more involved. And then you have your writing time. Now the writing time, it starts to change up a little bit once you get to this point. So first, you continue with sentence play. You work through copiousness. And now instead of amplification, they are going to be looking at a quarrel versus an argument. And they're also going to work on storytelling. So that is new as well. And of course, there's a lot of samples here to help you work through it with them. So it is definitely something that, is going to be easy enough to follow. Then you have the come and speak it section. And then the new revise it section that is new to this refutation and confirmation book. So in this revise it section, it says, remember that a paragraph is a group of sentences that are well organized to form an idea. Sentences are divided into paragraphs. So basically goes into explaining the difference between paragraph and sentences. It gives you a passage to look at, and they have to identify where the paragraphs should start. So it's really guiding them through step by step, very basic at first. Then lesson 5, this is your summary where you have all of your teacher notes. I was just making sure that that's what the activity was asking them to do, which is just to identify where the paragraphs should be in this, in this piece here. And that's what it was asking. So I was just verifying that. All right, and then you have your lesson, the wrap up of the lesson. And I'm just going to flip through just a few more pages for wrapping this up. But hopefully you get the idea of this book. As I said, this is not a review because we are currently doing this. I'm sure I'm going to discover new things as we work our way through. But hopefully this little brief enough flip through would be helpful to you. So you have your do it yourself refutation and confirmations. Then you have your glossary of terms. I always like the glossary of terms at the end of these curriculum. They're very helpful. I found the one in the logic that we're doing to be extremely helpful. But anyway. Alright, so you have your glossary of terms. Vocabulary builder. That's it. Alright, well, that's a flip through of the Refutation and Confirmation book by Writing Rhetoric. Thank you very much for watching. Hopefully that was helpful, and I will talk to you in another video. Bye guys.